The Duke invited his cleaning lady to mock her, but when she arrived, everyone was surprised. Before I begin this beautiful period romance story, please respond in the comments section and tell me where you are listening to it. I would love to know where you are writing me from. The clock in the hallway struck 5 with a sharp chime, as if tapping the house impatiently. Isabel Moreno was on her knees, rag neatly folded, polishing a balcony that no one ever touched, but which everyone demanded be perfect. The marble smelled like pavement. Gentlemen's boots did not tread that corridor at this hour, but vigilance never rested. Behind her, she heard the rustle of an expensive dress and the echo of confident heels. "Isabel, ami de beau," said a voice that did not belong to the staff. She did not turn around immediately. She finished the section of the veranda, stood up slowly, and then bowed her head. Mr. Duke, Alejandro de Montoya y Alarcón, was standing in the corridor where only butlers and maids usually passed. He wasn't wearing his hat. That didn't make him any less intimidating. His gaze was clear and cold, like a closed window. Isabel's stomach tightened, but her face remained expressionless. "Did I get in your way?" He asked, smiling slightly. "No, sir. Good, because I don't want any detours." Behind him came Don Eusebio, the head butler, his shoulders tense and his mouth set firmly. A few steps away, Clara, the maid, poked her head out of the pantry door and then quickly hid again, as if she had been caught breathing. Alejandro took a cream-colored envelope out of his pocket. It had a seal bearing the Montoya coat of arms. "There will be a dance this Saturday," he said, "and you are invited." Isabel blinked, not because she didn't understand, but because she was searching for a mistake. Someone had mispronounced her name. Someone had got the person mixed up. Someone had decided to mess with her. I escaped her lips softly. The Duke raised an eyebrow slightly. "Who else?" "The veranda." This comment elicited a nervous chuckle from the butler, who quickly suppressed it. Isabel felt heat on the back of her neck. She didn't move. "Sir, I work at the hotel and I know what you do," he cut her off. "That's why I'm saying it. I want to see you in the ballroom." Don Eusebio cleared his throat cautiously. "Your Excellency, perhaps it is not appropriate." Alejandro did not even look at him. "It suits me, and that is enough." Isabel took a breath. Her fingers still smelled of wax. The envelope felt as heavy as a stone. "And if it is?" "I cannot, sir." "You can," he said simply. "If you don't want to, you can refuse. But then I will know that you don't even have the courage to accept an invitation." The word courage scraped inside her. It wasn't an invitation. She couldn't do it. It was a trap, a show, a whim. Isabel reached out her hand carefully. When the paper touched her fingers, she could feel the embossed seal as if it were marking her skin. "Thank you, Mr. Duke." Alejandro watched her for a moment longer, as if waiting for her to falter, plead, or break down. He saw none of that. "Don't you dare be late," he said. "It would be disrespectful." "I won't be late, sir." His smile tightened. "We'll see about that." He turned and left. The butler followed him, but before leaving, he looked at Isabel as though asking for forgiveness and warning her at the same time. As soon as the echo of his footsteps had faded, whispers filled the corridor. They hadn't come out of nowhere. They had always been there, just waiting for permission. Clara poked her head out, her eyes wide. "What was that?" she whispered, coming closer. Isabel clutched the envelope to her apron. "Nothing, nothing," said Clara, lowering her voice even more. "He just gave you an invitation." Another maid, Martina, emerged from the kitchen with her hands on her hips. "Who did he give an invitation to, Your Excellency?" she asked, pretending not to know. Isabel did not answer. She knelt down again in front of the veranda. Martina giggled. "Oh no, she's serious. She's going to take her to the ball." Clara pulled her by the arm. "Shut up." "Why? If everyone finds out, they won't stop talking about it." Martina looked Isabel up and down. "Maybe the Duke got bored with the silk ladies and wants some variety." "Don't talk nonsense," muttered Clara Roja. Isabel continued carving, as if the marble needed her attention more than the poison dripping onto her. Martina leaned in slightly, looking for a reaction. "And what are you going to wear, Isabel?" "The clean apron." She laughed to herself. Clara pushed her. "Go to the kitchen." Martina left, but her laughter lingered. Clara knelt beside Isabel, speaking barely audibly with barely a movement of her lips. Are you okay? Isabel couldn't tell her the whole truth because she didn't understand it herself yet. She only knew that something was wrong, but in a different way. I'm working, Clara said. She swallowed. I think they're making fun of you. Isabel took a deep breath, feeling her throat burn, but her voice remained steady. Let them make fun of me. Clara looked at her with a mixture of pity and admiration. You don't deserve this. Isabel didn't answer. It wasn't because she didn't want to, but because in that house, people had learned that speaking up sometimes gave others the right to crush you. When she had finished the section of the veranda, she stood up. The envelope was still there, heavy against her chest. She looked towards the service door, the usual route. I'm going to the pantry, she said. Clara followed her a couple of steps. If you need help with anything, she paused, not knowing how to continue. Isabel held her gaze, and for a second, she showed a hint of humanity and tiredness. Thank you, she said, walking quickly without running. In the corridors of the masters, running was a fault. In the servants' corridors, it was a necessity. In the pantry, the air was colder. Isabel closed the door carefully, leaned against it for a moment, and squeezed the envelope between her fingers until the seal left a mark. She shouldn't open it there. She shouldn't do anything. She was an employee, a shadow. She didn't exist in the living rooms, and yet he wanted her in the center of one. To laugh, she thought, and the word tasted like metal. Shortly after, the dining room bell rang. Isabel hid the envelope in the inside pocket of her apron and continued along her usual route, carrying, cleaning, tidying up. The house was a huge body that ate and breathed at the expense of others' silence. In the anteroom of the main office, Isabel was arranging a vase when she heard voices. She knew she shouldn't linger, but she also didn't want to drop the vase in her haste to leave. She stood still for a moment, waiting for them to finish. The administrator, Don Basilio Rojas, had a precise, metallic voice. I'm telling you, it's not a good idea, he said. The dance attracts people, and people ask questions, replied another female voice in an unarguable tone. Isabel knew her without having seen her. It was Doña Inés de Alarcón, the Duke's aunt and mistress of the house. People always ask questions, Basilio said. That's why you either give them what they want or take away their tongue. Isabel pressed her lips together. Don Basilio sighed. The Duke is in a bad mood. He does things to provoke. That's what worries me. Doña Inés replied. His whims can open doors that should remain closed. Isabel felt a twinge in her stomach. Everything is under control, Basilio said, as if to convince himself. The documents are safe. Safe? Doña Inés let out a small, joyless laugh. You always say that because they are. The drawer is where no one would look for them. Isabel gasped. Don't mention that drawer, Doña Inés ordered quietly. Not even between us. Ma'am, please listen to me carefully, Basilio. If the dance turns into a circus, you will be in charge of cleaning up the mess. Understood? Yes, ma'am. There was a pause. Isabel should leave, but her feet wouldn't obey her. Basilio lowered his voice even more. The surname is buried. No one in Madrid remembers it. Isabel felt the world tilt. Don't say that surname. Doña Inés cut him off softly. Not the woman's or the daughter's. The surname, the woman, the daughter. Isabel wanted to swallow, but her throat was closed. Basilio muttered something that reached her like a leaf dragging across the ground. Moreno. Isabel didn't move. She couldn't. That sound wasn't just her surname. It was her mother's name, spoken by someone else, as if it were trash hidden under a fine carpet. Don't ever say it again in this house, said Doña Inés. It cost us enough. Basilio responded with resentful obedience. As you say. The footsteps receded. A chair creaked. Isabel remained glued to the wall, hand on vase, feeling that if she let go, everything would break. It cost us enough, she repeated to herself. What did it cost you? What did you bury? This wasn't the first time she had heard such insinuations. Since childhood, she had overheard snippets of conversation, heard giggles, and felt glances that avoided hers. She had learned not to ask questions. To ask questions was to lose work. To ask questions was to attract the attention of those who wanted her to be quiet. But now the Duke had invited her to the ball, and people were talking about drawers and surnames, wives and daughters. Isabel forced herself to move, put the vase back in its place, and stood up straight. She walked as she always did, without making a sound. She returned to the servants' quarters with a calm face and a pounding heart. She crossed the laundry room, where white sheets hung like flags in a silent war. She reached the small storeroom where tools, rags, and buckets were kept. No one followed her or looked at her. For the first time, this did not bring her relief. It made her angry. She went in, closed the door, and stood in the dark for a moment to catch her breath. Under a loose board at the back was a hidden space. Not because it was hers, but because life had taught her to hide what she couldn't afford to lose. She crouched down, slipped her fingers under the board, and pulled it up, her nails becoming stained with dust. She took out a package wrapped in old cloth and untied it with almost a ceremonial patience, as if she were afraid that the outside air would touch what she was keeping inside. Inside was the small, opaque metal medallion with an embossed seal, and the folded paper letters that seemed on the verge of tearing, but still held together. Isabel opened the first letter with steady hands, even though she was trembling inside. She didn't read for pleasure. She read to sustain herself. The handwriting was that of a woman, her mother's handwriting. My daughter, if one day they look at you as if you were less, remember this: you are not less, you are stronger. Don't let them make you believe that silence is your place. Silence is theirs because it suits them. Isabel closed her eyes for a moment. Her chest hurt, but she didn't cry. Tears were not unfamiliar to her. They were just private. That night, she didn't want to feel deprived of anything. She heard a soft knock on the door. "Isabel," said the voice of Doña Rosa, the senior seamstress, an old, skinny woman with needle-like hands. Isabel quickly put the letters away, but she didn't manage to hide the locket. Doña Rosa entered without waiting for permission. In the service, permissions were a luxury. "I was looking for you, Kyo," said Rosa. Then she saw the dull shine in Isabel's hand. "Ah," Isabel closed her fingers around the locket. "It's nothing." Rosa looked at her patiently as though she had seen it all before. "That's nothing. You've been telling me that since you were a child," she said, "and it's always been something." Isabel looked down, not because of her mission, but because she was afraid her voice would break. "I was invited to the ball." Rosa raised her eyebrows, not in surprise, but with dry sadness. "I already heard the rumor." "It's not a rumor. The Duke gave it to me." Rosa clicked her tongue in annoyance. What a subtle way to be mean, right? With a pretty envelope, too. Isabel hugged the medallion as if it were a hot stone. "Do you want to laugh?" Rosa approached slowly. "Yes," Isabel exhaled. "I don't have a dress." "That can be solved," Rosa said firmly. "What can't be solved is the harm they want to do to you." "They won't be able to," Isabel replied, not knowing where that confidence had come from. Rosa looked at her, searching for cracks. "Why are you like this?" Isabel hesitated. Speaking was dangerous, but Rosa was not just anyone. She had cooked in that house before Isabel was born. She had seen butlers come and go, young ladies grow up, and old people die, all while the music continued as if nothing had happened. Isabel lifted the locket slightly. "I heard Don Basilio. He was talking about a drawer and a surname." Rosa stood still. "What surname?" Isabel clutched the locket. "Mine." Rosa's mouth closed. A muscle twitched on her cheek. "What else did he say?" "That it was buried, that it cost money. And Doña Inés." Isabel swallowed. He told her not to mention the woman or her daughter. Rosa sat down abruptly on a box as if her legs had given way. "Oh, Isabel, do you know?" Isabel asked in a thin voice that grew angrier as the words left her lips. "Do you know something?" Rosa looked at her with old eyes full of concern. "I know your mother stopped looking for a way. I know she was done a great injustice." Isabel felt her heart beat faster. "What?" Rosa shook her head. "It's not my place to tell you this as gossip," she continued, "but it is my place to tell you that you're not crazy for feeling that they wanted to erase you." Isabel clenched her teeth. "I don't want them to pity me, and you don't deserve it," said Rosa harshly. "Look, girl, dancing can be a trap, but it can also be a doorway." Isabel looked up. "A door? To what?" Rosa pointed to the medallion. To what you keep inside, to what they don't want to come out. Isabel fell silent. The word drawer echoed inside her. If there was a drawer full of documents that Basilio was guarding, it was because he was hiding something that could incriminate them. Something to do with her mother. And with her. Rosa sighed. The Duke told you why. Isabel let out a short, humorless laugh. He didn't just say it as if it were a game. The lords think everything is a game because they never lose. Rosa stood up and adjusted her chin with 2 fingers without asking, as if she were still a child. But you're not part of their games. You're a person. Isabel felt her eyes moisten and hated herself a little for it. But Rosa continued talking. If you go, they'll watch you. They'll measure every step and every word. They'll look for your mistakes. I won't fail, said Isabel. The words came out as if she had been saving them for years. Rosa studied her. That's right, but don't confuse firmness with pride. If you feel like they're suffocating you, leave. Do you hear me? Nothing is worth more than your peace of mind. Isabel held the medallion in her palm. The seal looked like a mark of identity. My peace, she repeated, as if the word were too big for her. Rosa took a deep breath. I'll help you with the dress. It won't be brand new, but it'll look dignified. I'll do your hair too. I'll take care of your hands too. They won't accuse you of being dirty for a second. They like to make that up most of all. Isabel thought of Martina and her laughter. She thought of Clara and her fear, of the Duke and his half-smile, and of Doña Inés saying that the surname was hard to bury. I don't want to be seen, said Isabel, and as she said it, she felt the truth of it completely. I want to go and see them. Rosa looked at her with a spark of pride. That sounds different. Isabel quickly opened another letter, as if she needed to hold on to something. Mother didn't write much. She only wrote what was necessary. If one day they call you daring for not leaving, remember, daring is not a sin. Sin is the injustice they hide. Isabel folded the letter carefully and put it away with the others. She held the medallion in her hand as if it were part of her skin. Who was my mother to them? She finally asked. Rosa hesitated. A woman who saw something she shouldn't have. What did she see? Rosa pressed her lips together. A piece of paper, a signature, an agreement between people with names and people without. And when she tried to speak up, they shut her out. Isabel felt a blow to her chest. My mother remained silent. Rosa looked at her sadly. Your mother didn't remain silent. They silenced her. Isabel looked down. Her hand trembled, but not with fear, with anger. So they invited me to the dance just to laugh at me, she said, more to herself than to Rosa, and they paved the way for me themselves. Rosa took her hands tightly. Promise me you won't do anything crazy. Isabel looked up. Her eyes were steady. I won't scream if that's what you're afraid of. Rosa sighed. That scares me even more. Isabel let out a tiny smile. Don't worry, it's not in my best interest to scream. It's in my best interest to listen. Rosa let go of her. All right then, let's do what we know how to do. Work, Yokoso. You can hold your own. Isabel nodded. What if they fire me? Rosa shrugged as if fear no longer had power over her. They've kept you in fear your whole life. Maybe it's time for that fear to find a new owner. Isabel put the letters back in the cloth bag. She replaced the board. Dusting her hands, she placed the invitation envelope on the table. She looked at it as if it were a motionless enemy. I didn't even open it. Rosa picked it up and turned it over to look at the stamp. What a pretty stamp, she said sarcastically. What an ugly heart. Isabel took the envelope back and finally opened it. Inside was a card with elegant lettering stating that His Excellency, Duke Alejandro de Montoya y Alarcón, requested the presence of Miss Isabel Moreno at Saturday's ball. Miss, Isabel let out a dry laugh. Miss, she repeated. Rosa frowned. That's mockery. Yes, said Isabel, but it's also proof. Rosa raised a finger as if giving a lesson. In the ballroom, they won't ask if you're a miss or not. They'll try to make you doubt yourself. They'll talk to you as if you were a child. Isabel put the card away. I'm not a child. Rosa looked at her and nodded slowly. No, you're not. A bell rang in the distance. The signal to return to work. Service didn't stop for plans or humiliations. Rosa adjusted her shawl. Tonight, when everyone is asleep, bring me the simplest dress you have. I'll take it out and make it decent. I only have two, said Isabel. Then you'll have two to choose from, replied Erosawan, her eyes softening. I'll lend you a ribbon too. Don't refuse me. Isabel felt a twinge in her chest. Thank you. Rosa opened the door, looked out, and then left. And another thing, Isabel, she said. Rosa lowered her voice. Don't trust anyone in the salon, not their smiles or their pretty words. If someone tells you they're on your side, make them prove it through their actions. Isabel nodded. Actions. Yes. Rosa left. Isabel stood alone for a moment, holding the envelope in one hand and the locket hidden between her fingers in the other. She walked back through the familiar corridors. The house was the same. Pictures, doors, rugs, furniture. But inside, Isabel was no longer the same person she had been that morning. As she passed through the kitchen, Martina launched another attack as if she didn't know how to live without biting. You've already rehearsed how you're going to walk like a lady, she sneered. Let's see if you don't drop the mop in the middle of the floor. Isabel stopped. Martina smiled, waiting for the humiliation to take effect. Isabel looked at her without hatred. Martina, do you think I don't know when people are laughing at me? Martina felt uncomfortable because this wasn't the response she had expected. Of course I know, she replied. You don't need to remind me. Martina was speechless for a moment. Clara, who was standing nearby, put her hand to her mouth as if she had gasped. Martina forced a laugh. Oh, you think you're so grown up now? Isabel kept walking. No, I just got tired of being small so that others could feel huge. Clara followed her into the hallway. What's wrong with you? She whispered. You never talk back to them like that. Isabel adjusted her apron. I didn't answer them. I just told the truth. Clara looked at her as if she didn't recognize her. Are you going? Isabel didn't answer right away. She touched the hidden medallion. She could feel its shape under the fabric. Yes, she said finally. Clara swallowed hard. They're going to give you dirty looks. Let them. They're going to try to make you cry. I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. Clara looked down. The Duke thought of her smile and her voice saying, Who else, Theseus? The veranda. She thought about how easily she had been able to manipulate her. The Duke, Isabel said, measuring each word. Does he think he's in charge? Clara looked at her. And he's not. Isabel held Clara's gaze, her calmness not an absence of fear, but a determination. He's in charge of his house, not my soul. Clara remained silent. Then she nodded slowly, as if those words had lit a candle inside her. The rest of the day passed with a strange tension, as if the house itself knew that something had shifted in its foundations, yet was trying to pretend otherwise. Isabel worked as usual. No one could accuse her of carelessness. She cleaned, tidied up, and obeyed orders calmly. But inside, she was counting doors, schedules, voices, and names. When she heard Basilio passing the dining room, she pressed herself against the wall, not to hide, but to listen to the rhythm of his footsteps, as if that would help her to understand him. Basilio was talking to a footman. Make sure the office is locked, he said. I don't want anyone hanging around. Yes, sir. Isabel pretended to shake out a rug. She pressed her fingers into the edge until it left a mark. She locked a drawer where no one would look. It wasn't her imagination. It was real. As evening fell, Isabel returned to the cellar and her hiding place. She took out another letter. She didn't read it all. She just read the last line as if she needed an order to sustain herself. Don't ask permission to be dignified, daughter. Dignity is taken. Isabel folded the letter and put it away. Then she placed the medallion in the inside pocket of her skirt, close to her skin. She washed her hands with cold water, dried them on her apron, and looked at her reflection in a pot. She didn't look like a young lady. She looked like a tired woman. But there was something different in her eyes. They were no longer asking for anything. Stepping out into the hallway, she felt the air become heavier, as if the house were trying to put her back in her place. Isabel walked towards the servants' quarters, where the usual laughter and the piles of sheets and buckets awaited her. But the envelope in her pocket was no longer a mockery. It was a door. She had already decided to walk through it. This time, I'm not going to look down, even if it costs me my job. Saturday arrived like all things one fears, without asking permission. From early on, Isabel worked harder than usual, as if she wanted to exhaust her body so that her heart would not have the strength to be afraid. However, when the afternoon bell rang, Rosa pulled her by the arm and took her into the small room where they stored sacks of fabric and boxes of buttons. "If you're going to faint tomorrow," Rosa said, "faint tomorrow, but not today. Today you sit down." Isabel obeyed. She sat down on a low, slightly wobbly chair. Clara came in behind her, looking towards the hallway as if someone were about to scold her for breathing. "I brought water," Clara whispered, handing her a glass and a comb. "That's right," Rosa approved. "The basics, because we won't need anything else." Isabel took the glass. She wasn't thirsty, but her fingers were trembling slightly. She drank slowly. Rosa left a dark, plain dress made of good fabric, but worn at the edges, on the table. "This belonged to a lady who no longer lives here," said Rosa, not mentioning any names. "I adjusted it years ago and readjusted it today." Isabel carefully touched the fabric. "I don't want to owe anyone anything." "You don't owe me anything," Rosa replied sharply. "You owe me for making it." Clara let out a nervous giggle. "Rosa is more powerful than the butler," she said quietly. "Shut up and help me with the ribbon," Rosa ordered, her tone softening slightly. Isabel stood up. "Rosa, if this goes wrong, it will turn out however it has to." Rosa interrupted her. "And you're not going to beg. We're ready." Isabel nodded. Rosa pointed to a screen. "Get changed." Isabel went behind the screen and took off her uniform. She folded it carefully, as if folding the uniform would also fold away her fear. She put on the dress. It fit perfectly. Rosa had done a great job. "Well?" Clara asked from the other side. Isabel came out. Clara put a hand to her chest. "Don't make that face," said Isabel, feeling uncomfortable. "It's just that you look like you could be there." Clara lowered her voice at the end, as if it were a sin to say it. Rosa was unmoved. "Not yet," she said. "The neck is missing." She adjusted the neckline with 2 fingers, gently but firmly. "Don't lower it," she added. "Don't let them see the fear in your throat." Isabel swallowed. "I'm not afraid." Rosa looked her straight in the eye. "Don't lie to me. Be afraid if you want to. Just don't give up." Clara handed her the comb. "How are you going to do your hair?" Isabel touched her hair, which was usually tied back haphazardly. "Like always." Rosa clicked her tongue. "No, not like always. Today you'll tie it back neatly with no loose ends. No more touching your head as if you were asking for forgiveness." Clara began to comb her hair carefully. Her hands trembled slightly. "What about gloves?" Clara asked. Rosa opened a small box. "I have some," she replied. "They're old," she said, "but they're clean." Isabel looked up. "I can't." "Yes, you can," replied Rosa. "It's not to make you look like a lady. It's so they don't point at your hands as if they were to blame." Isabel remained silent and let Rosa put the gloves on her. Rosa took out a simple dark ribbon. "This goes here." She tied the ribbon around her waist with a discreet bow. Clara smiled a little, but the smile quickly faded. "And if they ask you questions," she whispered, "and if they make you look bad?" Rosa tapped Clara lightly on the forehead. "They won't make you look bad if you don't give them the time of day." Isabel took a deep breath. "I'm just going to walk around, say hello, and listen," she said. "Nothing else." Rosa nodded. "That's right. Short answers. If they try to corner you, just move on. Don't get stuck in a corner like a piece of furniture." Clara exhaled and asked, almost inaudibly, "What about the medallion?" Isabel stood still for a moment, then reached into her inner pocket. She touched it. "I'm wearing it," she said. Rosa didn't ask any more questions. She just looked at her as if she understood perfectly. "Hide it well, so no one can take it from you." Isabel tucked it under her dress close to her chest on a simple chain. A knock on the door made them both jump. "Isabel?" It was Don Eusebio, the butler. "His Excellency asked if you are ready." Rosa answered without opening the door. "She's ready when I say so." "Doña Rosa." The butler's voice sounded tired. "Don't get me involved," said Rosa, opening the door abruptly. Don Eusebio took a step back. You're already involved, said Rosa. You just don't accept it. The butler looked at Isabel and blinked. He made an obvious effort not to show his surprise. Miss Isabel, he said, his usual informality replaced by a formality that sounded strange coming from him. The carriage is ready. Isabel felt the floor move slightly. I'm not getting in a carriage, she said without thinking. Don Eusebio cleared his throat. Orders from the Duke. Rosa crossed her arms. Let the Duke take responsibility for his orders then. Don Eusebio pressed his lips together. It will be done. Isabel looked at Clara. Clara was pale. Don't worry, Isabel said softly. Clara shook her head. No, you don't understand. I'm not worried about the carriage. I'm worried about the people. Isabel clenched her fingers inside her gloves. People don't control me. Rosa adjusted her shoulders as if to stand up straight. Walk slowly, breathe, and don't look at the floor. Isabel nodded. Don Eusebio guided her down the service hallway. Each step sounded different in that dress. Not because of the dress itself, but because Isabel felt as though all the eyes in the world were behind the doors. As they crossed a corridor, Martina peeked out with a tray in her hands. She stared at Isabel, mouth agape. Oh, she said as if her tongue had fallen out. No. Clara, who was coming up behind her, blurted out, Yes. Martina quickly recovered, looking for mockery. Well, look at that, she said, her voice faltering slightly. Don't forget who you are when you go back. Isabel looked at her calmly. I won't, she replied. That's why I'm going. Martina remained silent. Isabel continued on her way. The carriage was waiting for her at the side entrance, as if they didn't want her to use the main entrance just yet. A serious coachman offered her his hand to help her in. Isabel hesitated but took it, not for pleasure but for balance. The journey was short. The mansion was already filled with music, lights, and the sound of elegant footsteps. Isabel knew this even before she entered. She could sense it in the changing air and the murmurs filtering through the walls. Don Eusebio led her to an interior door, not the main entrance, but a door that opened directly onto a corridor near the hall. When you open it, he said, go in. Isabel looked at him. Do you think this is right? Don Eusebio clenched his jaw. I believe His Excellency doesn't ask what's right. He asks what he wants. Isabel nodded as if she had always known this. Thank you for telling me the truth. Don Eusebio watched her for a moment. Be careful, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Those people smile with their teeth. Before Isabel could respond, the door opened. A footman announced in a loud voice as if reading something forbidden, Miss Isabel Moreno. The room fell silent. It wasn't complete silence, though, because there was always the sound of breathing, of fans being fanned, and of glasses clinking together. But the kind of silence that is spoken of in whispers did appear, the kind that sticks to your skin. Isabel took one step, then another. She could feel the weight of the stairs as if they were hands. She forced herself to look ahead. Near the center, there was Duke Alejandro talking to a group of gentlemen. He held a glass in his hand, exuding an easy confidence that could not be learned, only inherited. He turned towards her, seeming satisfied for a moment, as if the trick had worked perfectly. He approached her with a calm, unhurried gait, as if she were a form of entertainment. Miss Moreno, he said, nodding slightly. How punctual. Isabel held his gaze. You said not to be late, Duke. Some faint murmurs could be heard. Alejandro smiled slightly and nodded. Isabel responded in an even voice. I complied. The Duke looked at her as if her response had changed everything. Then do something else, he said. Say hello. He gestured towards a circle of nobles with his hand. There she was, Countess Beatriz de Ledesma, wearing a light-colored dress and bearing a smile that could cut glass. Next to her stood Doña Inés, her high collar accentuating the look of someone who forgives nothing. Other faces turned to watch the spectacle. Alejandro offered his arm. Isabel saw it. It was a scandalous gesture, even if it was meant to humiliate her. Accepting a duke's arm in the hall was a promise. Even if it was false, it put her center stage. He wants me to fall, she thought. And yet, Isabel took his arm. She didn't squeeze it or tremble. She just took it. The murmuring grew. How daring, someone whispered. How ridiculous, said another voice. Isabel didn't look to see where the voices came from. She kept walking. Alejandro led her into the circle as though presenting a rare collector's item. Countess, he said, speaking with gentle courtesy, allow me to introduce Miss Isabel Moreno. Beatrice raised her fan to her lips. Her eyes traveled shamelessly over Isabel. Miss, she repeated, savoring the word. Isabel gave a proper bow, not too big and not too small. Countess, she replied respectfully. Beatrice lowered her fan just enough to smile. How curious, she said. I've never seen you among us before. Isabel maintained her tone. I have never been invited, ma'am. A couple of gentlemen let out a quick chuckle, then hit it with a cough. Beatrice shook her head. And what is a young lady like you doing at the Montoya house? Isabel felt the sting of the question. Like you, she thought, there was the trap. They wanted her to define herself so they could box her in. Work, Isabel replied. Beatrice opened her eyes as if she had just heard a rude word. Work? She looked at Alejandro. Oh, Alejandro, really, she said, always so original. Doña Inés intervened, not looking directly at Isabel. His Excellency has a particular sense of humor, she said. Humor must be kept within certain limits. Alejandro smiled. Auntie, he said, humor is the only thing that saves us from boredom. Doña Inés looked at him with a silent warning. Beatrice turned back to Isabel. So you work, she said. What exactly do you do? Isabel didn't defend herself. She didn't feel ashamed. She just answered what was necessary. I clean the house, ma'am. Beatrice feigned surprise. Ah, she said. Then you know the nooks and crannies well. The intention was clear, giggles all around. Isabel looked at her calmly. I know them, she said, like everyone who enjoys what others hold up. There was a moment of awkward silence, not because of the phrase itself, but because it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a fact. Alejandro turned his head and looked at her sideways. Wow, he said softly. You talk as if you were reading a book. Isabel looked at him. I have read. Beatrice let out a short laugh. She has read, she repeated. How charming. And what does a young lady who cleans for a living read? Isabel felt the pressure of all eyes on her. She could say anything, and they would use it against her. If she stuttered, they would devour her. She remembered Rosa's brief responses. Whatever I find, she said. Beatrice insisted, like someone scratching a wound to see if it bleeds. And what do you find? Poems, novels, manuals on how to enter a room. Someone laughed more openly. Alejandro didn't stop her. His smile remained, but his eyes moved. They waited for Isabel to stumble. Isabel took a breath. I find words, she said, and words teach. Beatrice clenched her fan. Oh, how philosophical. She looked at a friend. Careful, she might give us a lesson. Isabel didn't look at her friend. She looked straight at Beatrice. I don't give lessons, ma'am. I only answer questions. Beatrice was speechless for a moment, which annoyed her. Alejandro took an amused step forward. Countess, don't be so harsh, he said. Tonight is a night for dancing. Beatrice smiled at him falsely. Of course, Alejandro. Dancing, I am interested in that. She turned back to Isabel. Do you know Miss Moreno? Isabel felt the air tighten in her chest. She could lie, she could say no, or she could say yes and be found out. She looked at the Duke. Alejandro raised an eyebrow as if to silently say, I want to see it. Isabel answered truthfully without giving herself away. I have seen dancing. Beatrice opened her mouth, ready to finish her off. Oh no, watching is not the same as… Alejandro interrupted her with an elegant gesture. This house offers opportunities, he said. Then you will learn. He held out his hand to Isabel as though inviting her onto the dance floor. The room tensed. Some were excited, while others were indignant. Isabel looked at the Duke's hand. It was not an invitation. It was a public test, a shove into the void. She placed her hand in his. With pleasure, Mr. Duke, she said. Beatrice opened her fan forcefully. What a scene, she murmured, but she kept watching because she didn't want to miss the outcome. The music changed to a waltz, and the dance floor filled with couples. Alejandro led Isabel to the center with a calmness that seemed mocking. Don't squeeze your fingers so tight, he whispered close to her ear. You're going to hurt yourself, Isabel replied just as quietly. I'm not squeezing. The Duke chuckled. Ah, so that's how your hand is. Isabel looked at him but didn't smile. That's how my decision is, Alejandro Parpadeo. There was a moment when something shifted in his expression, as if he hadn't expected her to respond. Decision about what? He asked. Isabel took the first step when he led her. She didn't stumble, not because she knew how to dance like a lady, but because she had learned to walk carefully all her life. Not to make it easy for you, Isabel said. Alejandro smiled, but not comfortably. Do you think this is work for me? You made it work, she replied. The people around them watched. Some were waiting for it to fall apart, while others were just looking out of curiosity. The cruelest of them all smiled. The Duke spun her around. Isabel followed his lead without losing her balance. Her skirt brushed the floor. She didn't look down. Are you holding on? Alejandro asked, sounding surprised. I've been holding on since before I met you, Mr. Duke. That sounds like a reproach, but it sounds like the truth. Alejandro clenched his jaw for a moment. I warned you not to be late. I didn't forbid you from talking. You didn't forbid me. I'm not in the habit of forbidding, he said. I'm in the habit of directing. Isabel looked at him. Well, not today. Alejandro let out a short laugh, but it didn't sound cheerful. It sounded like something that made him uncomfortable. If you fall, he said, they'll laugh. Isabel turned to face him. Let them laugh. It doesn't hurt. Isabel replied without raising her voice. It hurt when I gave them permission. Alejandro was silent for a moment. The music continued. The room continued to breathe. At the edge of the dance floor, Beatrice watched, clenching her fan tightly. When a friend whispered something to her, she responded with a venomous smile. She's acting, she said. I'm sure the Duke told her what to say. Isabel caught the phrase as she passed by. Her face didn't move. Alejandro heard it too. His eyes moved from Beatrice to Isabel. I didn't say anything to her, he said quietly. And that's the strange thing. Isabel didn't respond. She didn't want to reveal too much. She didn't want to give him any encouragement. The song ended. Alejandro released her with measured courtesy, without bowing too deeply so as not to suggest that he truly respected her, or perhaps so that no one would notice the stirring inside him. You've done your duty, he said. She didn't fall. Isabel lowered her hand. She was left wanting more. Alejandro opened his mouth but didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a table with soft drinks and glasses. Have some water, he said. You are going to get hot. Isabel looked at him. I don't need your care. It's not care, he replied. It's the ballroom rules. No one wants to see a guest get dizzy. Isabel understood the trick. If she got dizzy, it would be humiliating. If she asked for water, he would appear generous. Either way, she wasn't going to put on a show for them. Thank you, she said, walking over to the table. She could feel the stares on her back. She could feel the murmurs growing louder. Who dressed her? Someone asked. Doña Rosa, whispered another. How cheeky to bring a maid like that. Isabel poured herself some water. Her hands didn't shake. She took a sip, then put the glass down. As she turned around, she ran into Beatrice, who stood in front of her as if the space belonged to her. She's not doing so badly, said the Countess with a smile. That disappoints me a little. Isabel held her gaze. I'm sorry, ma'am. Beatrice chuckled. Don't apologize. Tell me instead, what do you hope to gain from this? Isabel didn't answer right away. The question was a trap. If she said respect, they would laugh. If she said nothing, they would crush her. If she said revenge, they would condemn her. Isabel chose the simplest truth. I didn't come to win, she said. I came to be. Beatrice raised her fan in annoyance. Oh, what a beautiful phrase. She must have learned it from those books of hers. Isabel didn't look down. I didn't learn it on the job. Beatrice leaned in a little, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. I'm going to give you some advice, she said. People like you shouldn't aspire to walk through certain doors because when they close, they'll crush your fingers. Isabel took this as an elegant threat. She didn't back down. Thank you for your concern. Beatrice frowned. Don't get me wrong, I'm not concerned about you. I'm concerned about your taste in men. Isabel carefully placed her glass on the table. Then take care of yours, ma'am. A small silence formed around them. Beatrice froze for a moment, taken aback that she had been answered. How insolent, whispered a friend. Beatrice smiled again, but her eyes were hard now. Don't forget your place, Isabel Moreno. Hearing her full name from those thin lips, Isabel felt a blow inside, not because it hurt, but because it affirmed her. I don't forget, she said. That's why I tread carefully. Beatrice was about to respond when an older, softer voice interjected with the authority that comes with years of experience. Countess, said the voice, aren't you the one who always says that the salon is sustained by courtesy? Beatrice turned around, her smile straightened automatically. Doña Elvira, she said, feigning affection. How nice to see you. Doña Elvira de Santillan was an elderly widow with silver, neatly combed hair and an unflappable air. She did not wear excessive jewelry. This made her more dangerous than anyone else. Doña Elvira looked at Isabel attentively, but without contempt. Good evening, said Isabel, bowing her head. Good evening, daughter, replied Doña Elvira. The word daughter sounded strange in that room. What is your name? Beatrice stepped forward, as if wanting to take control of the conversation. I already told you, Doña Elvira, it's Isabel Moreno. Doña Elvira did not look at Beatrice. She continued to look at Isabel. Moreno, she repeated, as if testing the sound. Isabel felt a slight chill. Yes, ma'am. Doña Elvira tilted her head. And where are you from? Isabel replied curtly. From Madrid, ma'am. Doña Elvira smiled slightly, as if that confirmed something. Madrid is big, she said, but it's also small if you know where to look. Beatrice interrupted impatiently. Don't waste her time with questions, Doña Elvira. It's a special invitation from the Duke. Doña Elvira finally looked at her. Countess, I waste time when I want to, she said sweetly, and my questions are my own. Beatrice clenched her fan, but smiled. Of course, Doña Elvira, she said, turning to Isabel with polite venom. Enjoy your water, she said. Don't choke on so much presence. And she walked away. Isabel exhaled slowly. Doña Elvira stayed by her side. Don't pay any attention to them, said the older lady, as if she were talking about unpleasant weather. They think the salon is a judge, but sometimes the salon is wrong. Isabel didn't know how to respond. Courtesy demanded that she show gratitude, but something in Doña Elvira's tone made her suspicious. It was too kind to be casual. Thank you, ma'am, said Isabel. Doña Elvira lowered her voice. Tell me something, Isabel. That medallion you're wearing is yours. Isabel felt a chill inside. Her hand moved involuntarily to her chest, where the medallion was hidden. What medallion? Doña Elvira wasn't offended. She just smiled as if she had an instinctive understanding. Don't be alarmed, she said. I saw it when you were dancing. It's an old seal. I recognize some of them. Isabel clenched her fingers. Her glove crinkled. It's a memento, she said. Doña Elvira nodded. Memories sometimes weigh more than a surname. Isabel held her gaze. She didn't want to open up. She didn't want to give anything away. Did you know my mother? Isabel asked. As soon as she had said it, she regretted it. It was too direct. Doña Elvira blinked in surprise. Your mother, she repeated more quietly. Why are you asking me that? Isabel felt her heart in her mouth. Because you looked at that locket as if you knew it. Doña Elvira didn't answer right away. She looked around, assessing who was listening. Not here, she murmured. Not with so many ears around. Isabel felt a wave of anxiety, but didn't show it. Then don't ask why anything here, she replied. Doña Elvira let out a short, almost proud chuckle. You have character. Isabel didn't let herself be flattered. I'm just careful. The music changed again. Alejandro watched from across the room. He didn't seem to be mocking Isabel. Now it seemed as if he was sizing her up. He approached her, a glass in his hand. His presence caused some people to step aside. Doña Elvira greeted him with genuine respect. I didn't expect to see you here, Alejandro. Nor did I expect to see your employee in the middle of the room, Alejandro, she replied, still smiling. But you see, life is entertaining. Alejandro looked at Isabel. You're bothering her, Doña Elvira. Isabel sensed the tone. It sounded protective, but also possessive, as if he owned what happened to her. Doña Elvira raised an eyebrow. Bothering? I'm conversing. The Countess is annoying and no one stops her. Alejandro pressed his lips together slightly. Beatrice gets excited. She thinks she owns everything she sees, replied Doña Elvira, and you allow her to. Alejandro held Doña Elvira's gaze uncomfortably. Tonight is a light night, he said. Light for those who never carry anything, replied Doña Elvira, looking at Isabel. Tell me, Isabel, she said, who taught you to dance like that? You don't look like someone who learned today. Isabel stood still. Alejandro also looked at her expectantly. Isabel chose a simple answer. I learned by watching and listening, she said. Doña Elvira smiled. That's more useful than many schools. Alejandro let out a short laugh, but it didn't sound happy. What an unexpected conversation. Doña Elvira studied him with sharp eyes. Unexpected is what's happening to you, Alejandro, and yet you still think you're in control of tonight. Alejandro frowned. What do you mean? Doña Elvira moved closer to Isabel as if to see something more closely. Isabel felt the chain of the medallion move under her dress and instinctively raised her hand to adjust her glove. The fabric slipped slightly, revealing the edge of the medallion for a second. Doña Elvira saw it completely, even if only for a moment. Her face changed. It wasn't a big gesture. It was a quick pale, a gasp. Alejandro noticed it. Are you all right, Doña Elvira? He asked suspiciously. The elderly lady did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on Isabel's chest where the medallion was hidden once more. Isabel felt a chill in her stomach. What's wrong, ma'am? She asked quietly. Doña Elvira swallowed. That seal, she murmured. I saw it many years ago. Alejandro took a more serious step forward. What seal? Doña Elvira looked up at him. There was something in her eyes that wasn't gossip. It was real fear. Alejandro, she said very quietly, who said it was a good idea to bring her here today? Alejandro squeezed the glass with his fingers. I did. Doña Elvira shook her head as if saddened. You're always as proud as your father. Isabel could feel the tension rising. Alejandro stiffened. Don't talk about my father in my house, he said, controlling himself. Doña Elvira ignored him and looked back at Isabel, seeking confirmation. Do you know what you're bringing? She asked. Isabel didn't answer. She just held her gaze. Doña Elvira took a deep breath. Her voice broke slightly. Tell me one thing, daughter. She lowered her voice further. What was your mother's name? Isabel felt the world stop. She knew that this question would open a dangerous door, but she also knew that tonight was full of them. Amalia, she said softly. Doña Elvira's eyes widened and her hand trembled. Alejandro leaned in, trying to hear. What did she say? Doña Elvira held her fan to her chest as if she were short of breath. Then, unable to help herself, she whispered the full name in a faint voice, and Alejandro heard it clearly. Amalia Moreno, Amalia Moreno. The name hung between the three of them, as if the music in the room had paused to make way for it. Doña Elvira pressed the fan to her chest. Her lips moved again, but no sound came out. Alejandro leaned toward her slightly. Incredulous, he repeated Amalia Moreno in a low voice. What does that name have to do with Isabel? She stood up straight. The chain of the medallion brushed against her warm skin. Doña Elvira finally reacted as if someone were pulling her back. No, here, she said quickly. No, here, Alejandro. Are you going to explain? He asked, his pride evident. You just said a name, and you're looking at me as if the past were breathing down your neck. Doña Elvira cut him off sharply. And yes, Alejandro squeezed the glass. His knuckles stood out. My aunt does not tolerate rumors in my house. Doña Elvira let out a short, bitter laugh. Your aunt tolerates what suits her. What she doesn't tolerate is the truth. Isabel didn't get involved. Not yet, at least. She could feel too many eyes on her and too many ears pretending not to listen. Beatrice, a few steps away, had frozen like someone who smells blood but doesn't know where it's coming from. Her friends were talking to her, but she barely nodded, her gaze fixed on Isabel. Alejandro noticed that look and frowned. Miss Moreno, he said, changing his tone, come with me. It didn't sound like an invitation, but rather a disguised order. Isabel bowed her head slightly. As you wish, Mr. Duke. Doña Elvira raised her hand. Alejandro, don't take her away as if she were guilty of something. You brought her here. Alejandro did not look at her, precisely because of that. Isabel took the first step and the room made way for her. Some smiled in anticipation, as if they sensed something worse than Bale's stumble was about to happen. When they reached a nearby corridor, Alejandro stopped. He made sure to remain outside the circle of prying eyes but within earshot. He asked directly if Amalia was his mother. Isabel held his gaze. Yes, sir. Alejandro clenched his jaw. Why did Doña Elvira react that way? Isabel took a breath, knowing she had information. What do you know? Isabel didn't answer. Alejandro tilted his head, his arrogance undiminished despite his unease. You're not going to start playing games with me in my house, are you? Isabel felt the force of his words, but didn't look away. I don't play games, Mr. Duke. Then speak. Before she could answer, there was the rustle of a stiff dress and the precise sound of a cane hitting the floor. Not for support, but as an announcement. Doña Inés appeared in the hallway, exuding a dangerous calm. She wore a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. What noisy whim have you brought into the salon? She asked Alejandro. Alejandro straightened up. Aunt! Doña Inés looked at Isabel as though she were a stain on a tablecloth. Miss Moreno, she said, and that formality sounded like mockery. I hope you remember where you are. Isabel bowed her head. I remember, ma'am. Doña Inés clicked her tongue softly. It doesn't seem like it. Alejandro took a step forward as if to stand between them. Not to protect her, but to control the situation. We're just talking. Doña Inés smiled. At a dance, conversations are for entertainment, not for digging up things. Isabel felt a brief chill. Doña Inés turned her head, and there appeared Don Basilio Rojas, almost hidden in the shadows. His face was more tense than usual. Basilio, said Doña Inés, barely moving her mouth. Do what I asked you to do. Basilio nodded obediently. Alejandro frowned. What did she ask you to do? Doña Inés looked at him as one might look at a spoiled child. Nothing that concerns you. Alejandro squeezed his glass. This is my house, and I am your family, she replied with poisonous sweetness. Don't confuse your title with your freedom. Isabel felt that they were trying to corner her with words, with position and inherited authority, without touching her. Basilio approached her with an exaggerated bow. Miss Moreno, he said, if you'll allow me, I need to speak with you in private. Isabel looked at him. What for? Basilio smiled, but his haste was noticeable. An administrative matter, a detail. Doña Inés intervened. It's for your own good, to spare you embarrassment. Isabel held Doña Inés's gaze. Thank you, ma'am. I don't need to be spared embarrassment. Doña Inés's smile tightened. That's precisely what worries me. Alejandro looked at Basilio. What detail, Basilio? Basilio swallowed. Nothing important, Your Excellency. Just a review. Alejandro frowned. A review of what? Doña Inés stepped forward. Alejandro, don't make a scene over an employee. The word employee hit him like an elegant slap in the face. Isabel didn't move. Alejandro looked at her. Then he looked at his aunt. I invited her, he said coldly. It's my responsibility. Doña Inés sighed. Your responsibility is your surname. Seizing the moment, Basilio spoke softly to Isabel. Please come with me. It will only take a moment. Isabel breathed. She knew what they wanted. They wanted to remove her from the room before the news spread further. All right, she said, not showing any haste. But I won't go alone. Basilio blinked. What do you mean? Isabel turned to Alejandro. If it's an examination, the Duke must be present. Alejandro raised an eyebrow, surprised by her audacity. Doña Inés let out a low laugh. What nonsense! Basilio turned pale. It's not necessary, miss. Isabel didn't look at him. She looked at the Duke instead. It is necessary, Mr. Duke. Alejandro held her gaze. Pride told him that he owed her nothing, yet something about the name Amalia Moreno had left a thorn in his side. I decide, he said. Basilio, take us to the Smil office. Doña Inés stared at him. Alejandro, aunt, he interrupted without raising his voice. No. Doña Inés stood still for a second, then smiled as if changing her strategy. As you wish, she said, but don't forget that the guests are watching, and a duke does not lower himself to the whims of his servants. Isabel walked without hurrying. Basilio went ahead and Alejandro followed behind with a firm step. Doña Inés followed him like a shadow, unwilling to relinquish control just yet. When they reached the small office, Basilio opened the door with a key he took from his vest. Isabel noticed that his hand was trembling. Inside, the noise from the hallway seemed distant. The silence felt heavier. Basilio closed the door carefully. Then, as if he had just remembered that he was with the Duke, he tried to look calm. "Your Excellency," he said. "It's silly, but you know how prudent it is." "Speak," ordered Alejandro. Basilio looked at Isabel. "Miss Moreno, a concern has been reported." Isabel lifted her chin. "Whose concern?" Doña Inés replied from the corner without sitting down. "Mine. I take care of this house." Isabel looked at her. "And what concerns you, ma'am?" Doña Inés took a step closer. "The fact that a servant would enter my living room with an ornament that does not belong to her." Isabel felt the blow to the medallion hidden under the fabric directly. Alejandro frowned. "Ornament?" Basilio cleared his throat. "A medallion has been seen. And with all due respect, Your Excellency, there have been incidents before with things disappearing." Isabel let out a short exhalation. Without laughing, she said, "I understand." Alejandro stiffened. "Are you accusing Isabel of theft?" Basilio opened his hands nervously. "No, I'm just being cautious. The ladies are sensitive." Doña Inés raised her chin. "It's not sensitivity, it's order. Everyone here knows what they can carry." Isabel fell silent for a moment. Then she spoke calmly. "I didn't steal anything." Basilio hurried on. "No one said that." Isabel stared at him. "They're implying it." Alejandro turned his head towards his aunt. "Is that what you want, to make her look like a thief?" Doña Inés replied without batting an eyelid. "I want to avoid public embarrassment. If you're carrying something you shouldn't be, hand it over. Then go back to your place." Isabel felt the blood rush to her face, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not handing anything over." Basilio swallowed hard. "Ladies, please." Isabel didn't move. Doña Inés smiled. "Look how stubborn she is. That confirms my suspicions." Alejandro took a step towards Isabel, but didn't touch her. As if the words were difficult to utter, Isabel said, "What is that medallion?" She held her gaze. In that office, away from the noise of the living room, she felt more alone, but also clearer-headed. "It's mine," said Doña Inés. She let out a theatrical sigh. "Nothing in this house is yours, girl." Isabel felt the word girl like a bloodless stab. "It's mine because my mother left it to me," she said firmly. "And my mother didn't ask anyone's permission to exist." Basilio took a quick step forward. "Don't involve your mother, miss." Isabel turned to him. "Why? Are you afraid of her name?" Basilio was taken aback for a moment. Alejandro turned to look at him. "Are you afraid, Basilio?" Basilio forced a smile. "No, Your Excellency, just old business." Doña Inés tapped her cane on the floor once. "Enough," she said, her voice firm but not raised. "Isabel Moreno, hand over the medallion." Isabel breathed out, feeling the medallion against her chest. No, the office fell silent. Alejandro looked at Isabel with a strange mixture of surprise, irritation, and curiosity. "Why are you wearing it today?" he asked more quietly. Isabel didn't answer right away. The answer was dangerous, but the night was already underway. "Because I was invited today," she said, "and because I heard a name that shouldn't have been said today." Doña Inés pressed her lips together. "What did you hear?" Isabel looked at her. "You know?" Basilio quickly intervened. "Ma'am, this is not the time." Isabel let out a dry laugh. "It's never the time for you people." Alejandro took another step forward. His tone hardened. "Isabel, they won't let you back into the ballroom if this turns into a scandal." "I didn't come for the ballroom," she replied. Doña Inés raised an eyebrow. "Then why did you come?" Isabel held the woman's gaze. Rosa's advice crossed her mind. "Don't get caught." "Move closer to see them," Isabel said. "I want to hear with my own ears." Basilio turned red. "This is insolence." Isabel turned to him. "Insolence is accusing me without proof." Basilio nervously adjusted his vest. "The proof? Ah." It slipped out. Doña Inés glared at him. Alejandro noticed. "What proof, Basilio?" Basilio hastened. "No, nothing, Your Excellency. I meant proof that nothing is missing and that everything is in order." Isabel saw through the lie. "It's not in order." I hate a murder, she said, and you know it. Doña Inés took another step toward Isabel. Do you think you're very clever for reading a couple of papers you found? Isabel didn't blink. I didn't find anything. I kept them. Basilio froze. Alejandro turned to Isabel. Kept what? Isabel clenched her fingers under her glove. Letters. The silence stretched on. Doña Inés closed her eyes for a moment, as if counting. Basilio spoke first, trying to sound paternal. Isabel, I'm telling you this for your own good. If you have documents that you don't understand, you could get into serious trouble and have no way to defend yourself. Isabel looked at him. I've defended myself my whole life without your permission. Basilio swallowed. I'm offering you something, he said, lowering his voice. Money, a new house, a better job, whatever you want. Just hand it over and forget about it. Alejandro froze. Are you offering her money? Yeah, Carmen. Basilio hurried to clarify. Her Excellency, sometimes the service misinterprets things from the past. Isabel felt nauseous at the word misinterprets. I'm not misinterpreting anything, she said. Doña Inés straightened her back. Alejandro, she said calmly, this has gone on long enough. There are guests, there is music, and there is our reputation. Do the right thing. Alejandro clenched his teeth. The right thing? For whom? For your family name, she replied. Isabel saw the rope tighten. Alejandro was in the middle, as was she, only she had always lived there with no choice in the matter. Alejandro looked at Isabel. What do you want? He asked, sounding annoyed. What is this? Isabel held his gaze. I want you to stop tarnishing my mother's name. Doña Inés let out a soft laugh. Your mother has no name in this world, child. She was just lucky enough to work under this roof. Isabel felt a blow to the chest but didn't show it. My mother had a name before she met you. She will continue to have one when you are no longer here, she said. Basilio took a small step closer but didn't touch her. Isabel, please don't do this. Isabel looked at him. You did this years ago. Basilio remained silent. Alejandro looked at him as if he were seeing him for the first time. What did you do, Basilio? Alejandro asked. Basilio opened his mouth but no sound came out. Doña Inés immediately stepped in. Basilio did nothing, she said. And you're not going to question your people in front of an employee. Alejandro squeezed the glass, then set it down on the table with a controlled thud. She's not an employee, he said, as if the words were stuck in his throat. She's the person I brought to the salon. Doña Inés looked at him, surprised by his tone. Ah, look, now you're making it important. That's what worries me about your games. Isabel took a step towards the door. If you want to fire me, go ahead, she said. I don't need your permission to leave. Basilio hurried to respond. No, it's not that. Doña Inés pointed to the door dryly. Yes, that's what it is. You can't return to the salon with that attitude. Dona Eusebio will accompany you to the servants' quarters, and we will discuss your future in this house tomorrow. Isabel felt the sting. They wanted to get rid of her, to send her back to the sidelines and erase the name she had just uttered. Alejandro turned to his aunt. It's not your decision, he said. Doña Inés lifted her chin. I decide what affects my family, and this woman affects it. Isabel looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see the Duke as an enemy, but as a man ensnared by an iron woman. Alejandro breathed tensely. Isabel, he said, lowering his voice, go back to the servants' quarters for now. This can't be resolved here. Isabel stood still. The phrase for now sounded like an empty promise to her. Then she asked. Alejandro clenched his jaw. We'll see. Doña Inés turned away, satisfied. She said, make her disappear from sight and have Basilio check what she has stored in her room. Isabel felt the direct attack on her hiding place. No, she said, the word coming out more firmly. Basilio looked at her as if he had already received permission. Miss, you know that the staff are not allowed to keep personal belongings in this house without authorization. Isabel let out a bitter laugh. They always make up rules when it suits them. Alejandro looked at Basilio suspiciously. What are you planning to check? Basilio hurried. Just to be on the safe side, Your Excellency. Doña Inés was already opening the office door, ready to go out to the music as if nothing had happened. Alejandro, she said without turning around, don't make me lose my patience. I've always been patient with you. And she left. Basilio hesitated for a second. Then he spoke to Alejandro in a submissive tone. Your Excellency, if you'll allow me, I can discreetly accompany the young lady to the restroom. Without any fuss. Alejandro looked at him coldly. I'll accompany her. Basilio blinked. You, Alejandro? He opened the door. Yes, Isabel went out first. The corridor felt narrower now. The music in the hall seemed to mock them, as if nothing else mattered. They walked toward the side corridors. Basilio followed insistently. Your Excellency, it's not necessary, he said. Shut up, Basilio, said Alejandro without raising his voice. Basilio fell. As they approached the edge of the hall, they could hear the murmur. Beatrice was waiting for them. She was smiling triumphantly. Is the performance over? Dulce asked. Are they returning her to her broom? Alejandro looked at her in annoyance. Mind your own business, Countess. Beatrice opened her eyes wide, as though she had been denied a precious stone. Oh, Alejandro, she exclaimed, offended. I alone— No, he interrupted. No. Beatrice clenched her fan, seething inside, but smiled at the others. As you say, Your Excellency. Isabel did not look at her. She wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Don Eusebio appeared as if by magic, his face pale. Your Excellency, he said. Something has happened, he breathed. Accompany Isabel to the bathroom and make sure no one disturbs her. He looked from Isabel to Alejandro, as if trying to understand at what point everything had gone wrong. Yes, Your Excellency. Basilio stepped forward. I can take care of it, Eusebio. It's just an administrative matter. Alejandro turned abruptly. You don't go near her, he said in a low voice, his tone suddenly harsh. And you don't enter the service quarters without my permission. Basilio swallowed hard. But your aunt, my aunt, doesn't rule over me, Alejandro replied, and Basilio lowered his head at the sound of those words. Meanwhile, Don Eusebio respectfully touched Isabel's elbow, guiding her. This way, Miss Isabel. Isabel walked. She didn't run and she didn't lower her gaze. What she felt inside was another matter. As they crossed the service corridor, Clara suddenly appeared, her eyes red from holding back tears. Isabel, she whispered. What happened? Isabel didn't stop. Nothing I didn't expect, she said. Rosa emerged behind them, hands on hips. I knew it, she said, her voice sounding like a knife. I knew they were going to look for an excuse. Don Eusebio cleared his throat. Doña Rosa, please. This must be handled with discretion. Rosa looked at him. Discretion is what they always ask of us when those at the top make a mess. Don Eusebio closed his eyes for a moment, looking tired. I can't argue, I'm just following orders. Rosa looked at Isabel. Did they take anything from you? Isabel shook her head. No, she said, pressing her lips together. Not yet. Clara stood close to Isabel. I saw you leaving with the Duke and Basilio, she said. I thought Isabel squeezed Clara's hand quickly. I'm fine. Don Eusebio spoke in a low voice. Miss Isabel, stay in your room for now. Don't go out into the hallways. Those are the Duke's orders. Isabel looked at him. The Duke's, she repeated, and felt a strange pang. Don Eusebio nodded. Yes, insisted Rosa. She snorted. How generous. First he threw her into the fire, and now he's lending her water. Isabel didn't answer. She went into her small room. She closed the door. Clara and Rosa followed her in without asking permission. Isabel leaned against the wall for a moment. The medallion burned her chest. Rosa looked at her. Tell me everything, she said. Isabel breathed. Doña Elvira saw the medallion. She asked about my mother and said her name. The Duke heard her. Clara put her hand to her mouth, and Isabel pressed her lips together. Doña Inés wanted to accuse me of theft. Basilio offered me money for some papers. Rosa froze. Papers, she repeated. So there are papers. Isabel nodded. Mine, Clara murmured. They're going to fire you. Isabel looked at her. Maybe, Rosa approached. And the Duke? Isabel hesitated. I don't know, she replied. She was still angry with Basilio. He sent me here, she said. For now. Rosa clicked her tongue. For now is what gentlemen say when they want to buy time. Isabel slowly removed her gloves. She looked at her hands. They weren't dirty, but they felt exposed. Clara spoke in a trembling voice. Isabel, what's that medallion you're wearing? What does it mean? Isabel finally took it out and held it up to the candle, letting it shine faintly. Clara and Rosa looked at it. Rosa snorted. That seal, she whispered. I saw it years ago on a paper that shouldn't have existed. Isabel looked at her. You saw it? Rosa nodded tensely. Yes, I also saw your mother's face when she came out of the office crying. I never knew everything, but I knew enough to realize that they had broken her without touching her. Isabel felt a knot form in her stomach. I don't want them to break me. Rosa took the medallion and gave it back to her. Then don't let go of it. Suddenly there was a soft knock at the door. Clara jumped. Rosa stood in front of Isabel as if she could protect her, even though nothing physical was about to happen. It was instinct. Don Eusebio opened the door slightly. Miss Isabel, he said urgently, His Excellency wishes to see you immediately. Isabel felt her heart pounding. Where in the large office? Replied Don Eusebio, lowering his voice. Go alone. Rosa pressed her lips together. No, Isabel said, looking at her. I have to go. Rosa took her hand. If he wants to save you, let him prove it. If he wants to destroy you, let him prove that too. But don't let him catch you in the dark. Do you hear me? Both clearly. Don't give in to him. Isabel nodded. Clara squeezed her arm. Be careful. Isabel tucked the medallion under her dress, smoothed her hair as best she could, and left. She walked through the service corridors until she reached the main hallway. There the house felt enormous again, as if it wanted to swallow her up. The echoes of the dance continued, but sounded more distant. The music sounded like a memory. When she reached the large office, she saw that the door was ajar. Isabel knocked twice. Come in, said Alejandro's voice. Isabel entered. Alejandro was standing by the desk, glassless and without a smile. His jacket was unbuttoned, as if he were short of breath. On the desk were an open account book and several loose papers. A lit candle cast long shadows. Isabel closed the door behind her. Mr. Duke! Alejandro looked at her. There was something different in his eyes. No longer amusement, but annoyance and doubt. Sit down, he said. Isabel didn't move. I prefer to stand. Alejandro clenched his jaw, but didn't argue. What do you have? She asked. What letters? Isabel held his gaze. Letters from my mother, and a document that, according to you, shouldn't be in my possession. Alejandro took a slow step towards the desk. You, she repeated, are getting me into the same situation as my aunt, Anne Basilio. Isabel took a breath. You invited me here to mock me, she said bluntly. So yes, I'm putting you in the same position. Alejandro tensed. Don't change the subject. Isabel didn't look away. I didn't change it. It's the same subject. Do you think you can move people around like objects? Alejandro leaned over the desk and pointed to the open book. Basilio has been managing for years, and my aunt insists that certain things must remain buried. Today I heard a name. I saw Doña Elvira turn pale. Then Basilio tried to buy her silence. What on earth is going on? Isabel felt that using the word hell was the closest he had ever come to losing his composure. What's going on is that someone committed fraud, she said. Alejandro stood motionless. Fraud, Isabel nodded. You confirmed it with a seal and papers that changed the fate of a woman who had no means of defending herself. Alejandro breathed heavily. Are you talking about your mother? Yes. He walked to the window and returned, restless and unwilling to show it. My father died years ago, he said. My aunt kept the house while I pretended not to want to explain my life to her. Basilio has always been there. Isabel heard this as confirmation. He was not the original author, but he was the heir to the silence. I don't know who signed it, Isabel said, but I do know who benefited. Alejandro paused. You're telling me it was the Montoyas? Isabel looked at him without rancor, but without kindness either. I'm saying that the Montoya house has lived comfortably on a lie. Alejandro clenched his teeth, then lowered his voice dangerously. Show me those letters. Isabel stood still. No, Alejandro blinked in surprise again. What do you mean, no? Isabel took a breath. Because you haven't made up your mind yet, and I'm not going to hand over the only thing I have to a man who invited me to the salon just to laugh at me. Alejandro opened his mouth and closed it again. The blow to his pride was evident. I am the Duke, he said as if that would fix everything. Isabel held his gaze. And I am the daughter of Amalia Moreno. Alejandro remained silent. The candle crackled a little. Isabel took a step towards him for the first time, approaching of her own accord. You asked me what I want, she said in a low, firm voice. I want justice, and I want you to understand that my mother was no rumor, no stain, no accident. Alejandro swallowed hard. His gaze hardened, but something broke inside him. If you make this public, you will destroy my family, he murmured. Isabel looked at him calmly. Your family is not destroyed by the truth. It is destroyed by what you did to hide it. Alejandro clenched and then unclenched his fists, as if struggling with himself. What did you come here for today? He asked, his voice sounding more human. I came for revenge. Isabel shook her head slowly. I came to collect what is owed to the dead. Alejandro stared at her, seemingly at a loss for words for the first time. He looked like a man caught between his surname and the guilt of others. Isabel sensed that this was the moment, but she wasn't going to beg or embellish her pain to convince him. Then Alejandro spoke more softly. My aunt says you are playing with fire. Basilio says you don't understand what you're getting into. Isabel took another step closer, but didn't touch him. I understand perfectly, she said. You didn't invite me to watch me shine. You invited me to watch me fall. You invited me so that you wouldn't have to face up to what your house owes to the dead. Alejandro stood motionless, as if the words had landed in his mouth and he didn't know how to respond without being tainted by them. There was no mockery or superiority in his gaze. He looked at her as one looks at something that can no longer be denied. Repeat it, he said softly. Isabel didn't blink. You invited me so I wouldn't see what your house owes to the dead. Alejandro clenched his jaw, walked slowly towards the desk, and leaned on the wood with both hands, as if he needed to hold on to something. I didn't know, he murmured. Isabel exhaled through her nose, resisting the urge to laugh. That's what they always say. Alejandro looked up, his pride wounded. Don't put me in the same category as Basilio. Then move, she replied. The Duke remained silent outside. The music from the ball continued, as if the house itself wanted to drown out the office with violins. Alejandro turned towards the door, as if he could hear the entire mansion pretending that nothing was happening. If I take one wrong step, he said, this will become a scandal. Isabel didn't speak. It already is a scandal. You just haven't wanted to see it. Alejandro took a deep breath. Show me the letters. Isabel stared at him. Why? To understand, he said without raising his voice. To know if my aunt has been lying to me all this time. Isabel clenched her fingers hesitantly. It was dangerous, but it was also her only chance to size him up. I won't give them to you, she said. I'll show them to you here, and you won't keep anything. Alejandro nodded slowly. I accept. Isabel reached under her dress and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. She placed it carefully on the desk, as if it were fragile. Alejandro looked at it as if it could set the room on fire. You've been carrying that all this time? He asked. Yes, Alejandro swallowed. Why didn't you speak up before? Isabel didn't look at him. She looked at the package. Because no one listens to a maid, and because my mother was silenced for trying. Alejandro didn't answer. He just waited. Isabel untied the cloth and took out 2 letters. She placed them in front of him first. Read them, she said. Alejandro took the first letter with steady hands, but the paper trembled slightly as if the past were pushing him. He read silently. His eyes moved quickly across the page, and his brow furrowed as he read. This, he murmured, your mother talks about a notary. Isabel nodded and then mentioned a signature that wasn't real. Alejandro looked up. My father. Isabel held his gaze. I don't know. I'm not making a convenient accusation. I'm coming with evidence. You'll see whose hands they belong to. Alejandro read again. Then he picked up the second letter. His lips tightened. Here he mentions a seal, he said, a medallion. Isabel took it out and placed it on the table. The opaque metal glinted in the candlelight. Alejandro examined it, seemingly finally understanding why Doña Elvira had turned pale. That seal, he said, is from an old notary's office. Isabel nodded. My mother kept it when she was fired from an office. She didn't steal it. She gave it to someone who didn't want to take the blame. Alejandro touched the medallion with his fingertip. This isn't a decoration, he said, almost to himself. No, Isabel replied. It's a key. Alejandro looked up. A key? To what? Isabel took a breath. To a drawer. The word hit home. Alejandro tensed up. Basilio had mentioned a drawer. Where is it? He asked. Isabel closed the cloth containing the letters and held it to her chest. I don't know, she replied, but I know it exists, and I know your aunt and Basilio are protecting it. Alejandro walked to the window and then came back restlessly. If this is real, he muttered. If this is real. Basilio didn't just manage it alone. Basilio hid it. Isabel looked at him without triumph, and Doña Inés commanded. Alejandro stood still, as if hurt by that phrase. My aunt said, not finishing. Isabel didn't press him. It wasn't her job to comfort him. Her job was to hold on to her truth. Alejandro turned to her. I need someone to confirm this, he said. Someone who isn't part of the service. Someone society can't dismiss as a fabrication. Isabel wasn't offended. It was just the way the world was. Doña Elvira, she said. Alejandro nodded immediately. Doña Elvira went to the desk bell and rang it once. Don Eusebio entered with a grave expression. Your Excellency, said Alejandro, wasting no time. Go and get Doña Elvira de Santillan. Tell her I need to speak with her privately now. Don Eusebio blinked in surprise. Now, Your Excellency. The lady is at my house, Alejandro interrupted. It's urgent. Don Eusebio nodded and left. Isabel put the medallion under the fabric, but didn't hang it around her neck yet. She held it in her hand. Alejandro noticed. You don't trust me, he said. Isabel did not respond. Not yet. Alejandro pressed his lips together in acceptance. Fair enough. There was a brief silence. Outside, the music changed to a cheerier tune. The joy inside the office was something else entirely. It was the possibility of untying an old knot. Isabel, Alejandro said more quietly, I did what I did for fun, for pride, out of habit. Isabel looked at him. Don't sugarcoat it for me. Alejandro nodded. I have no right. There was a soft knock at the door, and Doña Elvira entered, accompanied by Don Eusebio. The elderly lady's face was firm. She had recovered. Alejandro, she said, what are you doing? He pointed to the chair, but she didn't even look at it. I'm trying to understand, he replied. You saw the seal. You recognize the name. Tell me what you know. Doña Elvira looked at Isabel, then at the medallion in her hand. Do you have it? Doña Elvira asked. Isabel nodded. It was my mother's. Doña Elvira closed her eyes for a moment. Amalia Moreno, she murmured. What an injustice. Alejandro tensed. What happened? Doña Elvira opened her eyes. Your family protected a dirty deal, and your aunt made sure no one talked. Alejandro clenched his fists. My aunt? Doña Elvira looked at him as if she were eager to remove his blindfold. Your father was consumed by pride and debt, she said bluntly. Your aunt was driven by ambition. Basilio was the perfect man to blur the lines between the two. Isabel held Doña Elvira's gaze without breathing. My mother, said Isabel. What did they do to her? Doña Elvira swallowed. They didn't beat her. They didn't drag her away. There was no need, she said with mild disgust. They locked her up with words. They called her a liar and accused her of wanting to tarnish the family name. They took away her livelihood. Isabel clutched the locket. Alejandro stood motionless. And you allowed it? He asked Doña Elvira painfully. Doña Elvira held his gaze. I was a widow with a sick son, she replied. I saw, and I was afraid. I am ashamed. That is why, when I saw the seal today, I knew the debt was still there. Alejandro took a step towards the desk. What's in the drawer? He asked. Doña Elvira shook her head. I don't know where they kept it, but I know what it must contain, the original document and the altered record. They sealed it with that seal. Isabel lifted the locket slightly. So this is useful. Doña Elvira nodded. It works, and so does my testimony. Alejandro breathed as if he finally had something concrete. Good, he said, straightening up. Then this will be done with order. without unnecessary scandal, but without hiding it anymore. Isabel looked at him distrustfully, wondering what Amanto could possibly mean by order. What do you mean by order? Alejandro looked at her. I won't allow Basilio to touch your things. No one is going to kick you out today. You're not going to gossip. That's it. Isabel pressed her lips together. That's not justice, it's just the beginning, said Alejandro. Justice is served with a notary and evidence, not gossip. Doña Elvira nodded in approval. That's the right thing to do. Isabel crossed her arms. What about your aunt and the countess? Alejandro hardened. My aunt will have to answer for it. The countess is not in charge of this house. As if the world were mocking them, there was suddenly a delicate knock at the door. A nervous footman entered. Her Excellency Doña Inés requests your presence in the salon, he said. She says it is urgent. Alejandro looked at the footman as if he were the past intruding. Tell her I'm coming, Messi replied, and tell her I'm not coming alone. The footman swallowed and left. Doña Elvira raised an eyebrow. Are you taking her to the salon again? Alejandro looked at Isabel, not to show her off. So they don't make her disappear, he said. Isabel held his gaze. She wasn't sure whether to believe him, but she could see that it was a difficult decision for him. I don't need anyone to take care of me, she said. Alejandro wasn't offended. Then say it's not for you. Say it's for me because I did this, and I'll fix it. Isabel remained silent. Doña Elvira stepped aside as if to give them space, but didn't move. Alejandro spoke more softly. I'm not going to ask you to trust me, he said. I'm just asking you not to leave now. I need you to be here when I say what I'm going to say. Isabel breathed. All right. They left. Don Eusebio followed at a distance. So did Doña Elvira, with the firm step of someone who had decided not to remain silent again. When they entered the hall, the music was still playing, but the atmosphere changed immediately. Doña Inés was near the center, surrounded by nobles. Beatriz stood beside her, smiling as if she had been waiting for this moment. When she saw Isabel return with Alejandro, Beatrice's smile tightened. Alejandro, said Doña Inés sweetly, we were worried. A house cannot be held up by minor issues. Alejandro looked at her, but did not bow. They are not minor. Doña Inés watched him, gauging the threat. Son, you have guests, she said. This is no time for whims. Alejandro raised his voice just enough for those nearby to hear. He did not shout. I don't need to, Aunt. I have made a decision. Beatrice smiled and stepped forward. At last, she said. I'm glad. Your family needs this skill. Alejandro turned slightly toward her. In a cold tone, he said, Countess, your presence in my home has always been welcome. But tonight, I ask you to leave. The room fell silent again, a silence that cut like a knife. Beatrice froze. I'm sorry, she said, chuckling nervously. Doña Inés took a step forward. Alejandro. No, Aunt, he replied bluntly. I will not allow this room to be used to humiliate anyone else. Beatrice opened her fan, trying to maintain her pride. You're kicking me out because of her. Isabel did not look at her. She wasn't going to turn this into a staring contest. What was happening was bigger than Beatrice. Alejandro remained calm. I'm kicking you out because of your disrespect, and because I'm not in the mood for games today. Beatrice gasped for air. Looking around for support, she found only curious glances, some amused, others uncomfortable. Doña Inés gripped her cane. This is crazy, she said, her voice steady. You are making a fool of yourself. Alejandro approached her, close enough to speak quietly, but close enough for her to feel his firm presence. We made fools of ourselves when we buried an injustice, he replied. If you're involved, Aunt, we're going to clear it up. Doña Inés smiled, but it was a dangerous smile. Who put those ideas in your head? That woman. Alejandro didn't turn to Isabel. This was important. He wasn't using her as a shield. She didn't put ideas in my head, he said. She showed me evidence, and Doña Elvira confirmed it. Finally, Doña Inés turned to Doña Elvira, who was a few steps away. Elvira, she said as if the word were a betrayal. Not you. Doña Elvira lifted her chin. Yes, Inés, enough is enough. Beatrice took a step back, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. Alejandro, she said quickly, this could destroy you. Think of your name, your title. Alejandro looked at her with a coldness Isabel had never seen before. My title is worthless compared to the truth. Doña Inés pressed her lips together. And what do you plan to do? Confess your sins in the middle of the ball? Alejandro took a breath. No, I'm going to do the right thing in an orderly fashion. Tomorrow morning, Doña Elvira's trusted notary will arrive. The records will be reviewed. The drawer will be found. If necessary, it will be opened with the seal, and Basilio Rojas will be removed from the administration with immediate effect. Upon hearing his name, Basilio, who was standing near the wall, stiffened. Your Excellency, he said, advancing cautiously, please, this is a misunderstanding. Alejandro looked at him as one looks at someone who has removed their mask. Don't speak, he said. No, today. Basilio swallowed hard. I have been loyal to your house. You have been loyal to the lie. Alejandro cut him off. Don Eusebio, from this moment on, Basilio will not touch another piece of paper, enter any office, or approach Isabel. Don Eusebio nodded. Seriously? Yes, Your Excellency. Basilio tried to smile, but it broke. Lord Duke, I alone suffice, said Alejandro. Doña Inés looked at Isabel as if she wanted to pierce her. And you, she said to Isabel with gentle venom, that's what you were looking for, to destroy a home. Isabel felt everyone's stares on her. She could say something to calm them down. She could shrink away to survive, but she was no longer in that place. I want my mother's name to stop being whispered about, she said. Nothing more. Doña Inés let out a short laugh. How convenient. Now you come to my own living room to demand justice. Isabel looked at her without hatred. You demanded silence in yours. Doña Elvira sighed as if she could finally breathe. Alejandro turned to the people nearby, his voice carrying without him having to shout. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, the dance continues. There will be no spectacle. I only ask for your respect. This house will hold a private review tomorrow. Thank you for your presence, and remember that courtesy is not presumed, it is practiced. Some looked down while others pretended not to hear, but the message was clear. Beatrice clutched her fan in humiliation and turned towards the exit. Very well, she muttered. I'm leaving, but this won't stay like this. Alejandro didn't answer her. He didn't need to. Doña Inés stood firm as a rock. Do you think you've won? She asked Alejandro in a low voice. But this has a price. Alejandro held her. I paid for it. Doña Inés walked away with her back straight, as if no one could touch her. But Isabel noticed something. Doña Inés's hand was gripping her cane too tightly. The room began to breathe again, but it was no longer the same. The music now sounded like a thin curtain of noise. Alejandro approached Isabel. He didn't touch her, he just lowered his voice. I'm not sending her back to work tonight, he said. It's not safe. Isabel frowned. Safe from what? Alejandro glanced sideways towards where Basilio was being escorted by Don Eusebio and two footmen. From gossip, from traps, from disappearances, from papers, he said. If someone tries to take what she's carrying, it'll be easier if she's on her own. Isabel clutched the medallion under her dress. I'm not weak. I didn't say that, he replied. I said it's not fair for you to fight alone. Isabel looked at him suspiciously. So what do you want me to do? Hide in a guest room? Alejandro nodded shamelessly. Yes, a room with a lock, and one of Doña Elvira's trusted maids can accompany you. Rosa can come up to see you too. No one will touch any of your things. Isabel crossed her arms. You don't give me orders. Alejandro held her gaze. No, but this time I want to do something right. Isabel remained silent. She felt exhausted, but she also sensed that he was making a real choice, even though it was difficult for him. Doña Elvira approached. Daughter, she said, accept. Tomorrow we need your calmness and your completed paperwork. Don't give Inés a reason to say you disappeared out of shame. Isabel looked at Doña Elvira, then she looked at Alejandro. All right, she said at last, but on one condition. Alejandro nodded. Say tomorrow in front of the notary, you can't back out. Alejandro swallowed. I won't back out. Isabel held it for a second. And another, she added. Alejandro raised his eyebrows. Another. You asked me not to leave now, said Isabel. I'm asking you not to use me to make yourself feel better. I'm not your redemption. Alejandro stood still, and the blow hit him hard. You're right, he said quietly. I won't. Isabel didn't smile, but she felt a little better, as if someone had finally removed their finger from her throat. Alejandro moved towards the hallway and motioned to an older maid who had a serious expression on her face. The woman approached and bowed to Doña Elvira. Teresa, said Doña Elvira, I entrust Isabel to you tonight. Teresa nodded. Yes, ma'am. Alejandro looked at Isabel one last time. Tomorrow we start, he said. If this breaks something, we will rebuild it with truth. Isabel clutched the medallion under her fabric and replied without looking down. Tomorrow, she said truthfully. She walked alongside Teresa down the corridor, listening to the music that continued to play in the distance. For the first time, she felt that her mother was no longer alone in the silence. The morning arrived without music, but with footsteps that sounded louder than any ballad. Isabel didn't sleep much, not because she was afraid, but because the silence of the guest room was unfamiliar, and new things weigh heavily. Teresa, Doña Elvira's maid, stayed close by all night, but did not invade her personal space, as if she knew that Isabel needed room to breathe. When dawn broke, there was a knock at the door. Miss Isabel, said Teresa, Doña Elvira is already downstairs, and the notary is on his way. Isabel sat up and adjusted the simple dress that Rosa had left her the night before. It wasn't the one she had worn to the ball. This one was clean, sober, and dignified. She hung the medallion around her neck, hiding it well, and put the letters wrapped in cloth away. Teresa watched her with respect. Ready. Isabel exhaled. They went down a side staircase. When they reached a wide corridor, Isabel could hear restrained voices. There was no shouting or scandal, just tension. In the large office, Alejandro stood without his jacket, his face serious. Doña Elvira was seated firmly, while Don Eusebio held a logbook as if it were a weight. On the table was a tray with ink and pens, and by the window stood Doña Inés with her cane, looking as if she owned the place. Isabel entered without being announced. Alejandro looked up. She's here, he said, his voice softening a little. Doña Inés looked at her with contempt. Of course she came. She came to enjoy the chaos. Isabel did not reply, but instead approached the table and placed the cloth containing the letters on it, without opening them yet. Doña Elvira nodded as if to say, calm down. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. The notary announced Don Eusebio. Let him in, said Alejandro. An elderly man in a dark suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. He had the air of someone accustomed to polite lies. Duke Alejandro de Montoya y Alarcón greeted him with a nod. Notary Lorenzo Cifuentes, at your service. Thank you for coming so early, Don Lorenzo, replied Alejandro. I need a formal review of the documents for this house and a witness. Don Lorenzo looked at Doña Elvira. She told me last night that it was urgent. It is, she said. The notary looked at Isabel curiously without passing any judgment, and she lifted her chin. Isabel Moreno. Doña Inés let out a dry laugh. Miss, she said, how easily they climb up. Alejandro did not turn to look at his aunt. Isabel is central to this matter, said Don Lorenzo firmly, and will be treated with respect. The notary nodded as if he were not surprised by the order. Understood, Your Excellency. Explain the reason to me. Doña Inés stepped forward, seemingly wanting to take control of the situation. Reason? It was a whim of my nephew that got out of hand. An employee made up a story to take advantage. Isabel opened her mouth, but Doña Elvira stopped her with a gesture. No, said Doña Elvira. Reason, an old injustice sustained by silence. And today, finally, a seal was broken. Don Lorenzo frowned. Seal? Isabel took out the medallion and placed it carefully on the table. The notary leaned forward. This, he murmured in surprise. It's an old notary seal. I haven't seen one since I was an intern. Doña Inés gripped her cane. That proves nothing. Isabel spoke calmly. It proves that my mother wasn't lying. Alejandro approached the desk and pointed to the open account book. Don Lorenzo, he said, there are signs of altered documents and a drawer kept off the books. The notary looked up suddenly. A hidden compartment. Doña Inés intervened quickly. There is no such thing. Don Eusebio said in a low voice what he almost never said. The whole truth exists, ma'am. Doña Inez turned to him with contained fury. Eusebio, I have served this house for more than 30 years, replied the butler, and I have closed doors that I should not have closed. But today His Excellency asked for clarity. Alejandro looked at him with a silent gratitude. Doña Inez stiffened. You betray me too. Don Eusebio lowered his gaze, but his voice did not tremble. I do not betray you, ma'am. I am merely returning to the house what it lacks, am I not? The notary raised a hand. I need to see that drawer, and I need witnesses to what is found. I will also review the records and signatures. Alejandro nodded. Doña Elvira will be a witness. So will Don Eusebio. Isabel as well. Doña Inez let out a theatrical sigh. And me? Are you going to sit me down as the accused in your office? Alejandro looked her straight in the eye. You will be present. I'm not going to do anything behind anyone's back. But you won't be able to stop this either. Doña Inez smiled dangerously. You can't go against me. Alejandro held her gaze. Today I can. The notary adjusted his briefcase. Then, Your Excellency, he said, take us to the place. They walked down a corridor that Isabel knew well, having cleaned there many times before. The old office, which was hardly ever used, had a double lock on the door. Don Eusebio took out a key. Doña Inez spoke ironically. Such a rush to open graves. Alejandro did not respond. He opened the door. Inside, everything was excessively tidy, as if order were a way to hide the dirt. The notary looked at the furniture. A compartment is usually found in old desks or false bookcases, said Doña Elvira, pointing to a long piece of furniture against the wall. There, she said without hesitation. That piece of furniture hadn't been moved in years, but it was always protected more than a portrait whenever they changed the carpet. Don Eusebio nodded. I was always told not to let anyone touch it. Alejandro approached the piece of furniture. Basilio said suddenly, his voice hardening, Bring him in. Two footmen entered with Don Basilio Rojas, who was pale and sweating. He no longer wore his vest with pride. He looked like someone who had run out of hiding places. Your Excellency, Basilio said in a broken voice. I don't understand. Alejandro looked at him. Of course you understand. Doña Inez spoke with false calm. Basilio has no reason to be here. The notary intervened. If there are altered documents, the administrator is relevant. Basilio swallowed hard. I have served loyally. Isabel looked at him without hatred, but with a calmness that hurt him nonetheless. My mother also served, she said, and they punished her for speaking out. Basilio looked down. Alejandro ran his hand along the edge of the furniture. Where is the mechanism? Basilio moistened his lips. There is no mechanism, Your Excellency. That's crazy, said Don Eusebio in a low voice. Don Eusebio said in a low voice. Basilio always checked this piece of furniture before every important visit. Basilio shuddered. The notary bent down. He examined a molding. There's an irregular line here, he said, like a cover. Isabel felt the medallion grow heavier in her hand. Doña Elvira looked at Isabel. The key, she whispered. Isabel understood the seal. She approached the piece of furniture. Alejandro raised his hand as if to stop her. Not to dominate her, but out of caution. Isabel, he said, if this exposes you too much. Isabel looked at him. I've been exposed since I was born. This only names it. Alejandro lowered his hand in acceptance. Isabel brought the medallion close to a small, almost invisible cavity. It wasn't a lock exactly, it was a hole for the seal to fit into. The notary leaned forward. Yes, he said. It's an authentication mechanism. If you turn it, it opens. Doña Inez let out a short laugh. What a show! Isabel didn't answer. She pressed the medallion firmly into place and turned it slowly. There was a soft click, like a box finally giving way and closing. The molding loosened. Don Eusebio put a hand to his chest as if he were short of breath. God, Alejandro helped to lift the lid, accompanying the movement without pushing Isabel. Inside was a hidden drawer, and inside that was a bundle of papers tied with tape. Basilio took a desperate step forward. It didn't escape him. The footmen stopped him immediately, firmly but without violence. Don't come any closer, Alejandro ordered. The notary lifted the papers carefully. This will be reviewed methodically, he announced to everyone. Doña Inés turned pale for the first time. Alejandro, don't allow this, she whispered. Whatever it is, it will be settled within the family. Alejandro didn't look at her. It will be settled as it should be, he said. The notary began to separate the documents. Here is a deed of ownership, he murmured, and here is an amendment, a different signature, a forced stroke. Basilio was trembling. Not me, not me, Doña Elvira spoke in a harsh voice. Shut up, Basilio. Enough. The notary lifted another sheet. Here is a payment record and a note from the office. It mentions a witness, Amalia Moreno. Isabel felt her heart rise to her throat. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. She wasn't going to cry there, not yet. Alejandro turned to Isabel, and there was something in his gaze that wasn't pity. It was respect. Your mother was in the paper, he said quietly. Isabel nodded without speaking. Doña Inés stepped forward, trying to take control. That document is old. It could be wrong. It could be a forgery. The notary looked at her seriously. Ma'am, the forgery is in the amendment. You can see it. The ink is different too. The signature doesn't match those in the records from that time that I can consult either. Doña Inés gripped her cane. You don't know what you're doing. Alejandro finally looked at her, his voice cold. What you did is what brought us here. Basilio, broken, spoke suddenly. It was for the house, he blurted out. It was to keep it standing. There were debts. There were threats of foreclosure. Your father couldn't sustain it. Doña Inés turned to him furiously. Basilio. Basilio could no longer remain silent. You ordered me to, he said, his voice trembling. You said the woman didn't matter. You said she was just a seamstress and no one would believe her. Isabel felt the impact of his words, as if someone were squeezing her arm. She looked at Doña Inés. Doña Inés met her gaze with ice. It's true, she said. No one believed her. Isabel took a deep breath, and for the first time her voice wavered slightly, not from weakness, but from contained emotion. But I believe you, said the notary. He raised a hand. With this discovery, a process of rectification can begin. The real record must be restored. There will be financial consequences, perhaps the return of land or compensation for those affected or their heirs. Alejandro nodded without hesitation. Do it. Doña Inés looked at him as if she hated him. You're going to ruin yourself. Alejandro took a step towards her. If my surname is based on a lie, then let what has to fall, fall. I'm going to hold on to what's worth holding on to. Doña Inés pressed her lips together and pointed at Isabel. Now you can have everything you want. Isabel tensed, but Alejandro responded first. She's not here to steal, he said. She's here to get justice for what they did to her mother, and I'm going to make that happen. Isabel looked at him, surprised by his firmness. The notary took out another sheet of paper. Here is an official letter from the office, he said, as stamped and mentions compensation that was never paid. The letter also accuses Amalia Moreno of misconduct in an attempt to discredit her. That can also be formally rectified. Isabel clenched her fingers. That's what killed her inside, she said softly. Doña Elvira approached Isabel and briefly placed a hand on her shoulder. Today, that name will be cleared, she said. Basilio lowered his head in defeat. I only obeyed. Isabel looked at him and said, My mother only told the truth. Look where everyone ended up. The notary closed the folder carefully. I will draw up the documents today. The process will begin. I will need your signature, Your Excellency, as well as those of Doña Elvira as a witness and Isabel as an interested party. Doña Inés let out a sound of contempt. The signature of an employee. Alejandro looked at her. Isabel Moreno's signature, he corrected, and I don't need yours to do the right thing. Doña Inés stood motionless for a moment, as if she had been excluded from her own home. Then I am no longer needed, she murmured. Alejandro held her gaze, as the ruler of silence. No, thought Doña Inés, gripping her cane and turning away with her back straight. She did not beg and she did not ask for forgiveness. She simply left, carrying the empty dignity she had always had. The notary began preparing documents in the large office. Don Eusebio brought the folder. Doña Elvira sat down next to the notary. Alejandro signed with a steady hand. Then it was Isabel's turn. Isabel held the pen. For a moment, she remembered her hands covered in wax, the cold corridors, and Martina's laughter. Then she signed her name, Isabel Moreno. The notary blew on the ink. Done, he said. As of today, this matter is settled, and redress will be sought. Alejandro stared at Isabel's signature as if he had never seen it in its entirety on a piece of paper that did not humiliate her before. Doña Elvira stood up. I need to go home, she said. This is going to shake up half of Madrid, but it's done now. Alejandro bowed his head. Thank you, Doña Elvira, for not keeping quiet today. Doña Elvira looked at him with affectionate severity. Don't thank me. Make it up to him. Then she turned to Isabel. My dear, she said, if you need a place to stay while things settle down, my house is open to you. Isabel looked at her in surprise. Thank you, ma'am. Doña Elvira nodded and left with Teresa. The notary also left shortly afterwards, taking his documents with him. When the office fell silent, only Alejandro, Isabel, and Don Eusebio remained. The butler cleared his throat. Does His Excellency wish to order anything? Alejandro looked at him. Yes, he replied. Inform the servants that Isabel will not be disturbed, that her job is not in doubt, and that Basilio is out of the house. Don Eusebio nodded. Yes, Your Excellency. Isabel breathed a sigh of relief. The word employment struck her as odd. She was no longer thinking of staying just out of habit. Don Eusebio bowed and left, leaving them alone. Alejandro stood for a moment, unsure where to put his hands. He looked tired, but also as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Isabel carefully put the letters back in the cloth bag. She held the medallion for a moment before hanging it around her neck again. It's done, she said, as if afraid the heir would disagree with her. Alejandro nodded. It's already started. Isabel looked at him. Don't tell me. It began as if it were a promise. Today it was signed. I know, he replied, and I'm going to fulfill the rest. Isabel lifted her chin. What is the rest? Alejandro looked at her intently. Complete reparation, compensation and rectification of your mother's name with the relevant authorities. He swallowed. A public apology where necessary. Isabel watched him for a moment. That's going to be hard for you. Alejandro let out a brief, humorless laugh. It's already hard for me. Isabel took a slow step toward the door. Then that's it. I'm leaving. Alejandro tensed. Where? Isabel looked at him. Somewhere where they don't look at me as if I should be grateful they're letting me breathe. Alejandro took a step closer, careful not to invade her personal space. Isabel spoke, her voice lower than before. I don't want you to leave like this. She frowned. As if I were just the man who mocked you, he replied, and the truth hurt him. Because I was, but I don't want to be anymore. Isabel looked at him calmly. You can't undo what you did. I know, said Alejandro, and I'm not going to ask you to forget it. I'm going to ask you to see what I'm choosing now. Isabel pressed her lips together. Choosing now is easy when there's no way out. Alejandro shook his head. It's not easy. It would be easier to silence you, pay you off, and carry on with life as usual. It would be easier to obey my aunt, marry a countess, and smile at dances. Isabel held his gaze. Then why don't you? Alejandro stood still, and when he spoke, he didn't sugarcoat it. Because last night I saw you walk into that room with your head held high, even though I wanted to see you fall, and you didn't fall. When I heard your mother's name, I felt ashamed. Not for you, for me. Isabel swallowed hard. Her chest tightened, but she didn't allow herself to be overwhelmed. Shame doesn't fix anything, she said. No, Alejandro agreed, but it changed me. He paused as if the word he was about to say scared him. I started looking at you. Isabel looked at him suspiciously. Don't look at me as if I were a lesson. Alejandro shook his head. You're not a lesson, you're a person. I treated you like an object of amusement. Isabel held the silence, letting it fall between them. Alejandro took another step forward but stopped at a distance. Tell me what you need, he said, not to stay here or to live or to be at peace. Isabel clutched the medallion under her dress. I need them to owe me nothing. she said, her voice trembling slightly. I need my mother's name to be cleared, and I need— She fell silent. Alejandro watched her. What else? Isabel took a breath. I don't want anyone inviting me to a ball just to laugh at me again. Not here, not anywhere. Alejandro nodded. I guarantee you that. Isabel looked at him sideways. How? He held her gaze without looking away, offering her a place where no one could turn her into a mockery. Isabel frowned. A place. Alejandro swallowed. Not in servitude, not hidden, not as a favor. Isabel felt her heart race, and that bothered her. Don't speak to me in riddles, Duke. Alejandro inhaled as if he were about to jump without a net. I don't want you to be my employee, he said. I don't want you to be the subject of laughter. I don't want you to be the secret kept when visitors arrive. Isabel stood still. Then what do you want? Alejandro held her gaze, and for the first time his pride transformed. Honestly, I want you to be my wife. The air stood still. Isabel felt a rush of heat to her face, not from excitement, but from surprise and fear. She was afraid that this proposal would be another cage, even if it sounded golden. She didn't immediately say no, and her voice was louder than she expected. Alejandro turned pale. I understand, he murmured, lowering his gaze slightly. Isabel raised a hand. I didn't say no out of contempt, she said, clenching her teeth. I said no because I am neither a prize for your conscience nor a solution to your guilt. Alejandro looked at her. You're not. Isabel breathed heavily, trying to control herself. You are a duke. I am a woman without an important surname. If I marry you, Madrid will say that I did it for your money and that you stopped me. Will you ever believe that you saved me? Alejandro took a step toward her, his voice low. I'm not saving you. I'm choosing you. Isabel shook her head. Choosing me isn't enough. Alejandro was silent for a moment. Then, as if he knew what he had to do, he spoke softly but firmly. Listen to what I'm offering you, he said. Firstly, I will sign the full settlement without making any cuts, even if it means losing property or alliances. Secondly, you will have your own assets, independent of me, to cover the compensation due to you, as well as what I will contribute as additional compensation. Thirdly, no one will force you to live in this house if you don't want to. Fourthly, I will face the scandal without hiding you and without using your name as a shield. Isabel looked at him tensely. That sounds right. Alejandro nodded. And fifth, he added, lowering his voice, if you say no, I will accept. There will be no punishment or resentment. I will still make amends because it is the right thing to do, not because I want to buy you off. Isabel felt something inside her loosen. This was the first time a powerful man had offered her a genuine way out. Why buy? She asked, almost in a whisper. Why me? Alejandro looked at her honestly. Because you never looked at me as if I were a god. You saw me as I am. And when I saw you stand up in front of everyone, I felt something I can't name without feeling ashamed. Isabel pressed her lips together. Say it, you scoundrel. Alejandro exhaled. Admiration and affection, and something that makes me want to be close to you without dominating you. Isabel stood still. Then, her voice breaking slightly, she said, I don't know how to love like that. I've learned to take care of myself and to be distrustful. Alejandro lowered his head for a moment. Teach me, or let me learn with you. Isabel felt her eyes well up. She didn't cry, but she could feel the emotion vibrating in her throat. If I accept, they'll hate me. They've hated me before, said Alejandro. The hatred of others doesn't pay for your peace. Isabel let out a small, incredulous laugh. You say that because you were born with a roof over your head. Alejandro didn't defend himself. Yes, that's why I'm telling you I don't want you to depend on me. I want you to be with me by choice, not out of necessity. Isabel looked at him, weighing up his words. And if one day you regret it, Alejandro said, moving a little closer without touching her, I'll be a coward. Then I'll be a coward, he said, and you'll have what you need to leave without losing yourself. Isabel clutched the locket under her neck, as if her mother could hear her. My mother left me this to open a drawer, she said, not to open a marriage. Alejandro smiled sadly. Your mother left it to you to reveal the truth, and today the truth has revealed something between us too. Isabel looked at him and finally revealed what she had been holding back since the night of the dance. When you took my arm, I wanted to hate you, she said. And I did hate you a little, but I also realized that you don't know what it's like to be alone and not be able to say so. Alejandro stood still. Did you see me like that? Isabel nodded. I saw it. Alejandro swallowed. His eyes softened. Isabel spoke, and for the first time her voice sounded vulnerable. I don't deserve to be seen so clearly. She took a step towards him. Just one. It's not about deserving, she said. It's about choosing well. Alejandro stood still, as if afraid of ruining everything with the wrong gesture. Isabel looked up. I accept, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But not as someone asking for permission. I accept as someone who enters with my head held high and on my own terms. Alejandro exhaled as if he could finally breathe. Tell me all of them. Isabel looked at him firmly. Firstly, my mother will be mentioned with respect in the minutes. Secondly, Rosa will have a safe and dignified place because without her, I wouldn't be here. 3, Clara will not be punished for supporting me. Fourthly, I choose where to live. And fifthly, you will never speak to me as if I were inferior again. Alejandro nodded without hesitation. I accept everything. Isabel looked at him. No haggling? No haggling, he said. And I'll add one more thing. On the day we get married, I'll ask for your hand in front of whoever needs to be there so that no one can say I kept you hidden. Isabel felt the romantic impact, not because of the social gesture, but because of his courage in facing up to his world. Then she said, swallowing hard, yes. Alejandro approached slowly and carefully took Isabel's hand. He didn't pull or squeeze it too hard. He just held it as if it were something fragile. Isabel didn't pull her hand away. Alejandro lowered his voice. Forgive me for my cruelty. Isabel looked him in the eyes. I won't forget it, she said, but if you keep your word, I'll keep walking. Alejandro smiled tenderly. Let's walk together. Isabel nodded. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Don Eusebio poked his head in cautiously. Your Excellency, he said. The notary has left an additional document for Miss Isabel to review and sign if she agrees. He looked at Isabel with respect. Doña Rosa and Clara are downstairs. They ask if you can see them. Isabel let go of Alejandro's hand, not to run away, but to go to her people. Yes, she said. Send them up. Doña Rosa entered first, looking stern and ready to fight the world. Clara followed behind, looking nervous. When Rosa saw Alejandro, her face clearly said, let's see what you come up with. Alejandro took a step forward and bowed to Rosa, not for show, but in genuine recognition. Doña Rosa, he said, thank you for helping her. I apologize for what my whim caused. Rosa stood stiff with surprise. You're apologizing to me? She blurted out. Yes, replied Alejandro, and I'll tell you something else. Your work here will be respected, and if you ever decide to leave, you'll leave with a recommendation and decent compensation, without any threats. Rosa pressed her lips together. Her eyes moistened, but she held back the tears. You'd better, she said, turning to Isabel. Are you okay? Isabel nodded. She searched for the word. I'm free. Clara looked at Alejandro, then at Isabel, confused. What happened? Isabel took Clara's hand. What happened is that we signed the papers for my mother. They're not going to silence me anymore. Clara smiled tremulously. Oh, Isabel. Rosa looked at Isabel with affectionate severity. What are you going to do now? Isabel turned to look at Alejandro, not as if she had a mission, but as if she had a choice. I'm going to live, she said, and I'm going to do it without hiding. Rosa opened her eyes a little. What does that mean? Alejandro spoke calmly, without imposing himself. It means that I have asked Isabel to marry me, and she has accepted on the condition that I fulfill certain requirements. Clara put her hand to her mouth. No, Rosa remained silent for a long time, as if measuring the truth with an old ruler. Isabel, she said at last, look at me. Isabel looked at her. Rosa spoke in a low voice. If he hurts you, I'll throw Doña Inés's cane at him myself, even though it's not mine. Isabel let out a small laugh, tears in her eyes. He won't hurt me, she said, and if he tries, I'll leave. Alejandro nodded immediately. So be it. Rosa took a deep breath, and for the first time her face softened. Then your mother would be proud, she said. Isabel clutched the locket beneath her neck. I want to believe that. Alejandro looked at Isabel with restrained tenderness. It's not believing, it's knowing. The day progressed with paperwork, signatures, and decisions. Although there was no public scandal on the street, the house was no longer the same. Don Eusebio ordered changes. Basilio was dismissed formally, without public humiliation, and left for good. Doña Inés locked herself in her rooms and, when she tried to send messages, Alejandro returned them unanswered. 2 weeks later, in the chapel of a secluded house, and in the presence of Doña Elvira, Rosa, Clara, and a few other guests who were not there to gawk, Alejandro asked Isabel to marry him in front of a notary and a priest. He did so without grandiloquence and with a steady gaze. "Isabel Moreno," he said, "will you walk with me? Not as a shadow, but as an equal." Isabel looked at him. She wore the medallion around her neck, no longer hiding it, treating it not as a piece of jewelry, but as a symbol of truth. "I accept," she said, "but remember, I don't kneel before anyone." Alejandro smiled. "Neither do I before lies." When they held hands, there was no ballroom music. There was only respectful silence. In that silence, Isabel felt something she had never felt before, a future without fear. As she left, Rosa whispered in her ear, "Just look." From the cellar to the altar. Isabel let out a soft laugh. "Not from the altar," she corrected. "To life." Alejandro squeezed her hand as he listened to her. "To our life," he said. Isabel looked at him and, for the first time, allowed herself to show open tenderness. "Let Madrid talk," she said. "I no longer live by their voices." Alejandro leaned in close, without touching her forehead, just close enough for the promise to feel real. "Me neither," he whispered. "Because the only thing that matters is what we do when no one is applauding us." Isabel took a deep breath, feeling the medallion brush her heart for the first time. "Then let's do it right," she said. "Always," replied Alejandro. As they walked out together with Rosa and Clara at their sides and Doña Elvira watching with the calm eyes, Isabel understood what her mother meant by dignity. It wasn't about fighting to be accepted. It was about walking without asking permission until the right love found you face to face and said, without mockery or fear, "Here you are, and here you will stay if you want." Thank you very much for listening to this story from beginning to end. We hope it moved you as much as telling it moved us. We would love to hear your opinion. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked most. Rate this story from 1 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like to show your support. This motivates us to keep creating and sharing more emotional and educational stories. Before we say goodbye, we'd like to remind you that a recommendation for another exciting and charming story will appear on the final screen. If you would like to watch it, simply click on the video. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.